to create our projects today. We're going to create a folder locally, get everything set up, and then push it to GitHub. There's quite a few different ways to do this, so I'm just going to show you how I do it. So the first thing I do is I'm going to cd into the folder that I'm going to put all of my projects in. So for the whole workshop, I created a demo folder, and so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Then within the demo folder, I'm going to create another folder, and that's going to be my project. So I'm going to call it to-do list. Okay. Then I'm going to cd into to-do list, and I'm going to open up VS Code with my folder. So now I'm pretty much done with my terminal that's not part of VS Code, and I'm just going to go ahead and use my VS Code terminal moving forward. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my front end and my back end. So I'm going to start with my NestJS backend. So I go ahead and use the documentation all the time, whether I'm at work, whether I'm doing personal projects. I don't really feel the need to memorize everything because it's all right here. I already globally have NestJS CLI installed, so I just need to use the command nest new and then my project name to get started. Because I'm making an API, I'm going to type in nest new API, enter. And I like using npm, so I'm going to go ahead and go with that. And as you can see, my API folder is getting created. So we'll go ahead and wait for that to get installed. In the meantime, I can go ahead and look up my next thing, which is going to be my front end, which will be React. And I usually type in React TypeScript in order to get the right documentation. So I want create React app with TypeScript. All right, so this is the command I'm going to use. All right, so yay us, we have our NestJS API backend. There we go. So now we can go ahead and do the same thing, but for React in our front end. So I'm going to use create React app, and then instead of calling it my app, I'm going to call it front end. And then I'm going to click enter. So now this is the main structure of my project. API, backend, front end. I guess you could call these other things. I just always go with API and front end. So yep, now our React is loading. So the next thing that we are going to want to use is Chakra UI. So as you can see, I use it a lot. So then I'm going to go ahead and go to the getting started, copy that. All right. So I want Chakra UI on my front end. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into my front end. Oops, that's not all right. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into my front end folder. So now I'm in my front end. I'm also going to create a terminal window for my back end, and then I like to rename them. So this is going to be my back end one, so I'm going to rename it API, and then this is going to be my front end one, and I'm going to rename it front end. All right, I'm going to use the front end one first. So in the front end one, I want to do the installation for Chakra UI. So I copied the code, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. While that's loading, I will go ahead and take a look at how I use it. So I'm going to open my folder. I'm going to go to my source, and then let's see where we're at. Okay, so it looks like they are using it in the example. They're using it in the app.tsx. So we can go to our app.tsx. Okay, that looks fine. Normally I clean up a lot of the React stuff. I'm probably not going to do that, but just know like you don't need like every single file that React gives you. So I don't want the React normal like loading spinner page that they have. So I'm going to just get rid of all of that. And then I'm going to type in Chakra provider. As you can see, it's going to import it from Chakra UI/React, and then I can do the rest of my application. So I am going to use a box, and I'm going to say hi from app. Okay, so the way I like to do things is I like to do each step I like to test it, okay? That helps you know when you're debugging what your issues are. So if I can't see this box and it doesn't look like a Chakra UI box, right? Then I'm gonna know that I didn't get Chakra UI set up correctly, right? Okay, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna npm install, and then I'm gonna npm run start. And those are just like the normal React commands. So there's already something running on my port 3000. That's because I have my Coding with Callie website up and my to-do list up in the background. So I'm just gonna click yes and run on a different port. It matters less what your front end is running on, but it is important to know what your back end is running from. So we see hi from app, and that looks like the font that Chakra UI uses, but in order to test that we are for sure using the right thing, we can go ahead and add a button and say button. And that is definitely a Chakra UI button, okay? We can change the color scheme of the button to purple to make sure, and yep, it's working, woohoo. All right, so then let's go ahead and move on to the back end, okay? So we have front end working, but like I said, you can delete some of this stuff, so like logo, we aren't using that. I usually delete those too, and the tests, but if you wanna make front end tests, then you might wanna keep those. All right, so NestJS. The first place I would go is I would go to the package JSON in order to see my scripts. Okay, so these are the scripts that you're going to use to start your application, to test it, to start it versus dev or prod. Okay, so if I look at this, I see that the start script just runs nest start. Okay, so that's going to start up my backend, which is pretty cool and what I want. But if I look at start dev, I see that I'm starting and then I'm watching for changes. So I am actually going to want to use that one instead because I do want to watch for changes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do npm install, and I'm going to do npm run start dev like that, and that is going to start my API up and going. I'm not really sure what port I'm on and if I'm on the right port, because you can see in main TS, that's the file that gets run when you start it. It says 3000. I'm a little bit nervous that my ports are going to get mixed up, especially because I already have something running on port 3000. So I'm going to pick like a random port. So let's say 3025, okay? And that way I know that it's clear. Now, when you are working with other people, right, if this is hard coded, so anybody who runs my project is going to run on port 3025, but that's usually something that you would want in your env file because someone else might have something on port 3025, so it's just best practice that you create an env file and you put your port there, okay? I'm not going to do env right now, but when we get to that, we'll kind of go over it a little bit more. Okay. So next, we are going to go ahead and kind of look in our files a little bit. So main is when you're getting the whole project kind of up and running, right? If you notice here, we're creating our app, right, by using app module. So that would be the next step I would look, is I'd be like, okay, what's going on in app module? In app module, I see that I have imports, controllers, and providers, okay, which is my service. All right, so then I would look at that. I'd be like, okay, what's going on in controller? Okay, I see get, and that would remind me of a route. So I'm like, oh, okay, those are my routes. Get hello. Okay, so what does get hello do? Okay, it returns this .app service.get hello. Okay, so app service is coming from the class here, app service. Oh, look, this is my app service. Okay, so it's kind of how the files are all related, and you can kind of go through them to figure it out. Okay, but generally, the controller is where your routes would go, and then you want just the route there. The controller then calls a function in the service to do whatever you wanted that function to do. Okay, I'm gonna keep get hello. I think that's fine. I'm gonna look what it does. Okay, it returns the string hello world. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to test that on Postman to see if everything is working as expected. All right, so let's go ahead and localhost. I want to do a GET request. You know, it looks like I have a lot of, I'm going to just start fresh. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to just copy this and put it here. And then I am on localhost 3025, and I'm going to go ahead and press send, and I see hello world. Okay, so I know when I hit this endpoint, right, at localhost port 2025, that's running my API, right? I'm seeing that when I do a GET request to it, I'm hitting this endpoint, right, which is then calling this function, which is then returning the string hello world all the way to the front. So now let's see if we can ping the same route, right? Let's see if we can do it from the front end. All right. I'm going to close out of API. I'm going to go back into front end. I'm going to go into app, and I already have a button. So I'm just going to add an on click, and on click, I'm going to handle click. I'm really not great at naming functions. Const handle click is equal to, okay. So when I click the button, it's going to call this function handle click. So what I want it to do is I want it to make an Axios request. The issue is I don't have Axios installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new terminal. So this is the terminal my front end is running on. I don't really want to like stop my front end and then have to restart it. So whenever I'm going to download a new package, I just open a new terminal and then I cd into wherever I want it installed. So I want it installed on the front end, and then I do npm i Axios. If you don't know that off the top of your head, that's okay. You can just go and look up npm Axios and it's gonna pop up. And you should be able to, I think it's because it's response. Yeah, you should be able to just copy that. Okay. All right. So now that we have it installed, I don't need this terminal anymore. And I can go ahead and write Axios, and it's going to automatically import it for me. And I'm going to do a GET request, and I'm going to do a GET request to, let's get my Postman URL, because we know that that one works. All right. And then I'm going to, sure, let's do const response is equal to await Axios. Let's make this async. Okay. And then let's go ahead and console.log response and what the response is. Okay. So remember, when I hit my endpoint here, it returns hello world. Okay. Let's see what happens here. You can also, if you want to see logs, you can add console logs too. So I can go and add a console log here and say console.log here. Okay. So then if you're looking at your front end and you ping it from Postman, ping, you'll see it pop up here. Okay. Which is not the same things as the logging that we're going to set up. These are just like console logs for debugging, but still. Okay, so if I open up my console, all right, and then I go ahead and press the button, uh-oh, I get an error. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look at what kind of error. So it's the normal, I haven't set up CORS error, okay? I've been blocked by the CORS policy. So I like to let errors drive my development, okay? So you do one thing at a time, you test the one thing that you did. If it doesn't work, you know that that error is that exact last thing that you did. So the exact last thing that I did was try to ping the back end, right? It worked from Postman, but it's not working from my front end, and I'm getting a message that it's blocked by CORS policy. So all I would do is I would say, okay, so that seems like the issue's on my back end, so it's NestJS, right? And then I'm going to put in NestJS CORS. And then I see that the documentation has a whole thing. Okay, so I see const app await. Oh, I remember that was in my main.ts file, right? So then I look and it seems like I can say app enable cores. All right, so the watch thing, right? Did you notice how when I saved something, it blipped? I guess I have to save something bigger, but it blipped, and it's because it's restarting your server. It won't restart if you change something in your env file. It's not watching that. So if you change an environment variable and you press save and then you notice like it's not working still, you want to actually like Control-C and restart your API. Okay, so now if I go over, let's see if we can get it to work now. So open up my console and button. Hello world, very exciting. Okay, so now we have the front end connected to our back end, okay, which is pretty exciting, but that's not all we want to do. We also want to set up a database, okay? So the database is what we're going to do in the next video. Stay tuned.